Hello, my name is Zach Tuner. If I'm JBO Booksmart, and today we're doing a novels versus video. This is a video where we compare the book to the movie. This is also gonna be one of those videos where we're gonna talk about kind of like I talked about the first one and not the second one. I'm trying to get ahead of these before I go see the movie or before I watch the movie, but because it's October, I had like two thrillers and this one made more sense. You can watch this currently. You can rent it. It just came out on digital. I still think it's playing in theaters too. Obviously, based on the title, you can tell that we're comparing The Long Walk, the book, to The Long Walk, the movie. I did see the movie first, and then I read the book. But first, because I had to do a self promo, I did write a book called Gunshot Residue. This follows Alex as he believes his husband is cheating on him. He soon realizes that some secrets need to stay buried after he goes searching for answers, and he's wondering if he can survive the fallout. The sequel, P49, comes out on November 3rd. They're both going to be in Kindle Unlimited, so if you love it, but you don't want to pay the $4.99, but you have Kindle Unlimited, you can wait and you can binge both back to back. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about The Long Walk. I think we're going to start with the book first, and then we'll jump over into the movie. But here's the thing, because I'm talking about them simultaneously, there is a good chance that I will talk about them sporadically. If I'm talking about the movie poster will show. If I'm talking about the book poster will show. Is editing Jake going to hate me? He already does, but I'm hoping this video isn't going to be super long, so I'm trying to give him pull, okay? Essentially, the book, the premise of this story, it follows a group of, I don't know, it's like 100 men? It follows a group of men as they trek across country for a thing called The Long Walk. It is set in a dystopian universe, and we're following our main character as he decides to take on this walk. It is a voluntary thing, however, they do say it's called punching your ticket. In this case, punching your ticket means brutal death. And so they understand the consequences. If you stop walking, you get 3 warnings. After that 3rd warning, your ticket is punched. You try to make it as far as you can. You can't. Once you make it, you get 1 wish and an unlimited amount of riches, whatever it might be. For the book, the reasonings are much different from the movie. I also will talk about sexuality and some other layers that I feel like other things did better in certain areas. So with the book itself, it is Stephen King, but it's early Stephen King. We're talking 90s to 80s Stephen King. The one where he's saying words that he shouldn't be saying. Ultimately, I landed pretty low on this novel. I landed on a 2-star for the novel. Garrity is a character that I find much more likable in the movie than I do like in the book. In the book, his personality is very, I'm a straight masked man. There's scenes of him kissing, there's scenes scenes of him having sexual desires and stuff. A lot of that is taken out in the book. In the movie. This is from the 70s. It's 1979. It's very of its age. It's very of its time. The violence is very shocking. It's very brutal, and the characters are not very likable. I want to say McCrary, I think is how you say the name. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it's going to be in here or not. McCrary is one of those characters that I did enjoy both adaptations. However, I feel like they did more with this character in the movie than they did in the book. Plot-wise, once again, it stays pretty similar to one another except for some pretty dramatic changes, which we'll talk about at the end. I just want to give a quick rundown of my thoughts and opinions on both matters. The writing here, I also did not care for, but I do have to say I've read a lot of Stephen King at this point, and this is not a Stephen King problem. This was just simply this book's problem. He also had an interesting opening because it was originally written under the name of Richard Bachman. He did look at these as 2 different personalities, and so his writing style as Stephen King was so different from Richard Bachman. And he was also very pissed that they soon learned that it was Richard Bachman. This was not a pen name that he could write many books under. It was just a few books under, from what I understand. I mean, 16, Richard. Okay, Stephen, you can't get that mad. But it was not over a course period of time that he believed that he should. That, he wanted more out of it, I guess, out of this pen name. It was much different from what his normal writing was. In a way, I do believe it's a bit more brutal, at least in his earlier work. His newer work, I do think sometimes pushes that edge of that envelope. His older work, unless you're counting the behemoths of It, things like The Stand and stuff. I also do not like The Shining, for instance. I mean, I read quite a bit of Stephen King's work. I've read quite a bit of early Stephen King's work. I've dabbled in newer Stephen King's work. However, for adaptation-wise, almost every time I hate the book. Almost every time. He just has a way of speaking that I think is particularly horrendous. The way he describes women is horrible. It's very disgusting, very misogynistic. In this case, it's a bunch of teenage boys, and so you can kind of write it off because of that, but also you can't write it off because there's no way that Garrity as a character is thinking of how big his mom's breasts are. It's just not a thing. Is he thinking it when he's making out with a random girl on the side of the road? For sure. His mom? That's the introduction I need for describing her character, is the size of her breasts? I don't think so. And that's the difference. Because that's not something Stephen King really does nowadays. days, but it's very popular in his earlier work. Other things, like I mentioned, there is quite a few slurs in this book. I have a lot of offense with this. I've talked at length on this channel about how I feel about authors that are white using slurs for authors that, you know, that they don't identify with. Essentially, a white person doesn't really have any slurs because the patriarch, like, I mean, you name it. Oh my god, we have privilege, lots and lots of privilege. There's so many things that we have that other minority groups do not have. And so the fact that these words come so willingly off his tongue in his writing, and I've read research papers and stuff, him talking about it, of him being like, you know, it's to dive into the characters, and so you can feel how evil and how heinous they are, but they would say such a derogatory term. And on one hand, you could also say the same thing about a script, right? Let's say this movie also contained a lot of interesting language, and it was written by a white man, right? The script was written by a white man. I don't know if he had anybody else come on to write it, but the main writer was a writer that I really enjoyed. However, a lot of this language that I'm talking about, I think there might be like one or two words that I could be eclipsing in my mind right now, I saw this a minute ago, is very absent from the text. And I think there's a lot of different ways you can make a character evil, you can make a character disgusting and vile without stepping over lines that are truly, I don't think, should be stepped over. I read a lot of extreme horror, okay? And so my line for what you can step over in writing is very small. However, it is there. I do have a line in the stand. And so as soon as that language did start getting popped up, and it popped up quite frequently very early on, I was automatically docking points, docking a star off of it. If I loved it, it would have probably been like a 3.5 because of it. And I would have been like, I don't even know, I'm gonna give you a warning. Because I think it's important to give a warning because one, it's shocking and it's used for shock value. It's used in this way to make you feel uncomfortable, and I don't like that. I don't like that aspect of his writing, and it's very prevalent in his writing as well. But yeah, so it was a 2. I didn't care for it. The book ends, actually we'll talk about that when we talk about in the third section. So then we have the movie. I'll put the movie over here. The movie follows once again Garrity as he takes this long walk. There's a bit nuance here. He doesn't have a girlfriend like he does in the book. I didn't mention that, but that's like one of the biggest changes is that he has somebody waiting for him that he wants to strive for. However, the cast here is what really sells this. In my opinion, I was really looking forward to the director. I really like Francis Lawrence. I really enjoy, and also J.T. Mulliner also comes in and works does a script who I also really like. I gave the movie a 4.5 out of 5. Me and my husband both just do not care for the opening. I mean, the ending of this movie, which we'll talk about as well. But Cooper Hoffman did a phenomenal job. David Johnson was, I would say, my personal favorite in the entire movie. Garrett Weering did a great job. Ben Wong did a great job. Charlie Plummer has a very interesting and that type of role that we just talked about. I feel like it's a lot. Roman Griffin Davis also has a lot to do. Joshua Odedek also was really good in it. Naoto, I also think did a good job, but I'm not 100. I can't remember Arthur super much. He's vaguely coming back to me at this moment in time, I should say. Mostly the standouts here, I would say my biggest standout for this movie is David Johnson. Also because Cooper Hoffman comes out of here single, and it is pretty much in both texts, in my opinion. I picked up on the subtext. Peter McGarris comes off as a very queer, very gay character. David Johnson puts a lot of mannerisms to that as well. You can see it pop up quite a bit in the space as the movie has come out on digital. A lot of people picking up on that context. This wasn't something I heard talk about, and it's because I think you would put it under the queer baiting category. However, in my opinion, they're only together for approximately, it's like 3 days. They're deeply in love by the end, in my opinion, okay? Which I think is the only reason why certain actions that were taken here make sense. We'll talk about once we get to the ending. However, that was my big takeaway from the movie. I was shocked by the violence. I was shocked at how graphic it was. That was one of Stephen King's big staples when adapting, that it had to be rated R and that it had to be very violent. Another staple that was talked about was the fact that this originally was a conversation for the Vietnam War. However, when you start talking about the long walk and the idea of the long walk and the world of the long walk, it starts to crumble very quickly. Because, and you look at it from like Vietnam War section of life, right? That makes a lot more sense. You're putting these people basically in a draft. You're sending them out to die and they're automatically going to die, which is how a lot of people felt about the Vietnam War. That it was an endless thing, which is why he's called the Major. And there's a lot of similarities to that. But the movie takes away all that subcontext. All of it gets drawn out. It's set in a different time period, the whole 9 yards. And so when you look at it from the movie's perspective, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You don't really understand outside of a few characters that are here for particular reasons understands why these men would risk their lives in such a grueling and just like horrible act, especially because we don't know how the world is. From our perspective, the world is very poor. It looks very much like rural America, like if they're walking through like Missouri or something, like very rural, you know what I mean? Or Ohio or some shit like that, you know what I mean? If you're from those areas, if you're familiar with that type of town and village and those situations, it looks very similar to those. So I didn't really see the point. This is where the comparison is going to start. Essentially, Raymond is a character that comes in with the action to kill the Major. That's his goal. This is not a goal in the original book. His original goal is to get the money, is to survive and see the person that he loves again. It's very simple. In the movie, and it's a lot of death, they had 2 scenes with his father and things that were not a part of it beforehand. And the book ends with Sevens, played by Garrett Weaving, character announcing, "Hey, I'm the Major's son." And then Peter Maveris says, "I can't walk anymore. I give up. You guys go win this." Sevens ends up dying, and so Raymond wins, but he continues to walk as if he didn't win, because he didn't realize that he won because of the turmoil and the horribleness that his body has gone through, that he just continues to walk. And that's also another conversation, once again, if you look at the subcontext of the Vietnam War. The movie, however, has 7 ciphers after this announcement of who the Major could be. And then we also have Peter McGarris and Raymond Garrity fighting for one another to continue to go forward. In my husband's opinion, we both thought they were going to die together, that they were going to stop together. What could they do? There's only 2 left. It's not like you can shoot the first one. They stop at the same exact time. It's like the Blueberry Effect with the Hunger Games. The movie did not take this route. The movie has Raymond profess his love, in my opinion, to Peter, who McGarity also professes his love to Garrity, and he ends up surviving because Raymond believes that he should survive. It's an act of love, in my opinion. Once again, easy. However, McVarys does not have a lot of... And see, this is where things get a little complicated. He does ask for the rifle to kill the Major. He kills the Major. These are all the things. However, the Major is like Donald Trump in America right now. You know what I mean? And so, like, if you kill Donald Trump, you think there would be, like, extreme, like, consequences to those actions. And so, when the Major dies, and the fact that there is no extreme consequences to those actions, and he just walks forward as an homage to the end of the book, it doesn't make a lot of sense. However, a lot of people believe it's because the ending is supposed to be like subconsciously he's walking, but he's been tackled or something else has happened, and it hasn't veiled that to you yet. And there's like some audio. There's like some tricks they use to convey that, but I don't think they conveyed it hard enough. One could also say that Peter has some very big things. He wants to change the way the Long Walk works. And him killing the Major by doing something out of love, in my opinion, towards Garrity, this changes the entire perspective of his character in the last 10 minutes. And it doesn't have a lot of build up because they're not going full ham on this relationship. There's a lot of nods to it. Like I said, David Johnson plays really heavily into it in the movie, but it's not strong enough. But I did land on a 4.5. I felt like the movie was beautiful. I feel like there's a lot of good things to take away from it. And David Johnson's performance is truly just fucking spectacular. It is very gross though. Very, very gross. So just to be warned. That being said, that's the novel versus, in my opinion, the movie adaptation was better. How many times is this gonna happen? A little scary. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll tell you all next time. Thanks for watching and goodbye.